There is grandeur in this view of life.
Welcome to Evolution Talk with Rick Coast, an introduction to the oldest story ever told.
I've always been fascinated by the idea of artificial intelligence. I don't mean the voice assistant on your smartphone or a home device. I mean true intelligence that can think, make decisions, or hold a real conversation expressing thoughts and even feelings. Now, it may never happen, at least not in the way I'd like to see it happen, but imagine what an accomplishment that would be. It could be that with its creation, we would have paved the way for the next inheritors of the earth. We inherited it from the dinosaurs, and so we can pass it on to our own creation. But to get there involves a painstaking process of trial and error, just like Edison's attempts to find the perfect filament for his light bulb. Popular legend has it that Edison failed 10,000 times. Now, it might be less than that, but the point is well taken. It didn't happen overnight. Neither did the Wright brothers' attempts to build the first motor-operated airplane. And to think, what truly boggles my mind is that a little over 60 years later, after the Wright brothers' attempt, or their first successful attempt, we'd send 3 men to the moon.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The reason I bring all of this up is to illustrate a point. It was a billion series of small steps for man to reach the moon. You can trace the desires and attempts for man to reach the sky all the way back to Leonardo da Vinci and his sketches for a flying device with wings. Now, the first men to leave the ground did so in a hot air balloon in 1783, and those early dreamers and inventors lent their mind and skills to an effort that has evolved and has changed. Some attempts to leave the ground failed, and some only succeeded by a few inches. And some may in the not-so-distant future, if you listen to Elon Musk, set foot on Mars. Now, nobody would say that the Apollo lunar module appeared after a random series of events. It would be ludicrous to say so. It's so ridiculous that the astronomer Fred Hoyle stated something similar in his 1983 book, The Intelligent Universe. What he wrote is this.
A junkyard contains all the bits and pieces of a Boeing 747 dismembered and in disarray. A whirlwind happens to blow through the yard. What is the chance that after its passage, a fully assembled 747 ready to fly will be found standing there, so small as to be negligible? Even if a tornado were to blow through enough junkyards to fill the whole universe.
Fair enough, and I have to agree with Mr. Hoyle. A tornado will never randomly create a 747, nor will it create a lunar module. It's safe to say that it really wouldn't create anything at all except for a bigger mess. Now, Hoyle suggested that life could not have spontaneously risen from inorganic matter and gone on to randomly create complex creatures. Natural selection works with mutations, random mutations. Nobody created those mutations. They just happened. And therein lies the crux of the argument.
That's what I'm saying. Evolution is random. Random changes can't create something. If anything, a random mutation would be harmful to an animal. And random events certainly can't create an animal.
Again, I have to agree somewhat. A random series of events is highly unlikely to create anything at all, let alone a living, breathing animal. And since evolution depends on random mutations, are those detractors right? Well, of course not. There is more than random mutations when it comes to evolution by natural selection. You also have to look at other variables outside of genetic mutation. Variables such as the environment the organism lives in, the challenges it has to face, and its ability to find food. It also has to attract a mate. And after that beautiful meeting happens, reproduction has to take place. Successfully. So we should leave those two alone. Now that we have all the variables lined up, nature does the rest. A mutation is neither good nor bad. It's just different. A genetic variable has been altered. Whether or not that alteration is beneficial or not remains to be seen. If it's not, then the unfortunate carrier of this mutation may find itself unable to cope, and if it is beneficial and allows the organism to have a slight advantage over those without the mutation, then that wonderfully altered gene may be passed along for generations. Now, how about an example? And it's a real-life example, but I'll play around with it a bit to drive my point home. Let's take the leaf mimic katydid. Now, this amazing little insect lives in the Amazon rainforest. It got its name leaf mimic because, well, that's what it does. It mimics leaves. Not consciously, of course. It has no idea it's engaging in a game of vegetative cosplay. But somewhere along the line, one of its ancestors looked a whole lot different. Perhaps it didn't resemble any other insect. So let's make it a she and call her Katie. Maybe she was green with normal wings and had a great big head. And then along comes a random genetic mutation, which gives one of Katie's offspring a slight red tinge to its wings. And that's not good. Now it's easy to spot. It doesn't last long when a pygmy marmoset comes along with an appetite for insects. It sees the red-tinged wings right away. Not knowing when to give up, Katie tries again. And this child looks just like her, sporting the usual wings, big head, and everything else. Now the next child suffers another mutation. I'm not sure what's up with Katie and mutations, but let's go with it. This child's wings are greener than the others of its kind, and greener than Katie's for that matter. It's neither a great benefit nor a handicap, so it grows up to have children of its own. They have greener wings as well. And a few generations later, one of Katie's great-great-great-grandchildren is born with a smaller head. And further on down the line, another one is born with larger wings. But lo and behold, they sort of resemble a leaf. Years and years later, other mutations crop up. Some make it easy for predators to see them, but those wings, the ones that look like leaves, suffer mutations that make them bigger and veinier. Animals pass them by, and so those mutations persist. And if Katie were alive today, she wouldn't recognize her centuries-removed grandchildren. For all intents and purposes, they look like leaves on a branch. She might even pass them by. Some even look like old leaves that have been munched on now and then by predators and rodents and all sorts of other animals. All because of random genetic mutations. So you see, these mutations, the ones that accumulated over time because they allowed their bearer to better adapt to its environment, they did create something. We now have an insect that centuries ago didn't exist in the rainforest. Now, that's pretty cool. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to give the impression that all mutations are beneficial to an organism. As we saw with Katie's early offspring, a mutation that gave their wings a red tinge was harmful in the environment they lived in. What's harmful in one environment may be great to have in another one, say one with red leaves here and there. Environments change. New predators may wander in, and an adaptation which was once beneficial may no longer be such a great one to have. Another thing that I need to mention is that most mutations are neutral. They happen all the time. And many of those are small changes that are neither harmful nor help the organism out in any way, shape, or form. Evolution is a process. It's a mindless process, but it's by no means a completely random one. The first step may be that mutation of a gene, but the next step is where natural selection steps in to take over. And it's all about the environment. And that's where randomness ends. Now look at it this way. Fish have fins, right? And not just one type of fish. Almost all fish have fins. There are exceptions, though, like the hagfish. It's a genuinely remarkable creature that scavenges on the ocean floor and moves about like an eel because it doesn't have fins. Another thing all fish have in common are gills. I won't even begin to estimate how many species of fish exist in the world, but they can all trace their lineage back to a common ancestor, and they also evolved separately and in different environments. Those environments molded them into the sleek shapes for swimming and selected for fins to help navigate that environment. Now, this is an extreme example and practically an impossible one, but let's say a random mutation suddenly saw a skunk give birth to a baby skunk with fins instead of legs. It wouldn't survive long in the hostile environment most skunks live in, right? It was a random change and a harmful one. Now, random events and chance do play an enormous role in evolution, and a necessary one. Without the random changes which allowed us to adapt to our environments, we wouldn't have lasted very long as a species. Natural selection sees to it that only those adaptations which provide benefits, however slight, persist. But chance is a cruel partner, too. Just ask the dinosaurs. They were doing great. They ruled the world at one time and for millions of years. Then 65 or 66 million years ago, give or take a million, a chance encounter with an asteroid changed the environment so rapidly that they didn't have time to adapt, and as a result, they died out. This new environment was a harsh one, but one which mammals managed to survive in. And here we are today, the happy result of random events, chance, and natural selection. Oh, and don't forget, a genetic code that doesn't employ a perfect duplication process and allows for random mutations to occur. We have quite a lot to be thankful for. You can thank your lucky stars, or you can thank that big asteroid which struck the Earth all those millions of years ago. But don't forget evolution by means of natural selection. We should certainly be grateful for that. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Evolution Talk. I'm Rick Coast, and you can find show notes and source material used for this episode at evolutiontalk.com. Now, I hope your week is going well, and until next time, please take care of yourself.
Evolution Talk is a Rick Coast production.